Moonlight glimmers on the brim of Lee Marvin's battered fedora as he steps out of the smoky saloon and into film history. Known for his gravelly drawl and steely glare, Marvin projected an image of unbreakable toughness in war epics and outlaw westerns. Yet behind that hard veneer lay personal battles and untold scars that would shape both his career and private life. This is the untold truth of a man who fought demons as fierce as any on screen, and whose legacy extends far beyond his trademark squint. Born in 1924 in New York City to a struggling window dresser and a seamstress, Marvin's early childhood was far from glamorous. His parents' marriage crumbled when he was a toddler, and young Lee spent years shuttling between relatives in New York and foster homes in small-town Florida. Gossip and magazine bios gloss over these formative years, but the truth is that Marvin learned survival the hard way, hiding from bullies, sneaking meals when food ran scarce, and teaching himself to stand tall amid chaos. Those survival instincts later became the armor he wore in Hollywood boardrooms and battlefield sets alike. By age 18, Lee Marvin had enlisted in the Marine Corps, seeking both direction and escape. Stationed at Camp Elliott in San Diego, he transformed from a lanky kid into a hardened rifleman. A brutal training accident left him with shrapnel in his leg, but he refused evacuation, crawling back to his platoon despite excruciating pain. Fellow Marines nicknamed him Rocket for his explosive temper and uncanny ability to fix misfires under fire. His combat ribbons would later translate into an on-screen authenticity that few actors could match. He knew the weight of a helmet, the chill of mist on a war-torn beach, the roar of artillery echoing in his bones. Marvin drifted through odd jobs and struggled bit parts on Broadway before landing his first movie role in 1952's The Wild One. His breakout came 2 years later with The Big Heat, where his performance as a sadistic villain stunned audiences and critics alike. Yet while the world booed and hissed at his on-screen cruelty, few realized the nuance he brought to the role, a tortured man battling internal demons of maltreatment and abandonment. That complexity would become Marvin's hallmark: villains with a code, anti-heroes who commanded sympathy, and war heroes haunted by ghosts. In Hollywood's golden age, Marvin stood apart. Studio bosses found him difficult. He refused typecasting, demanded better scripts, and insisted on realistic depiction of violence. When offered a romantic lead, he turned it down cold. He didn't believe in wearing rose-colored glasses. Co-stars whispered about his mood swings. Some called him arrogant, but those close to him saw a man driven by unspoken pain. He once snapped at a director, "If you want a cookie cutter, go get some gingerbread. I'm here to show you what real life feels like." That raw honesty earned both admirers and detractors, but it cemented Marvin's reputation as an actor's actor. Off-screen, his personal life mirrored those complexities. Marvin married 3 times and fathered 4 children, yet his presence at home was often sporadic. Busy shooting on location in Vietnam for The Dirty Dozen, or trekking through European forests for Point Blank. He missed birthdays and anniversaries. Letters exchanged between him and his first wife reveal a man torn between devotion and a restless hunger for new challenges. He confessed to feeling caged by domestic routines, craving the electric thrill of a new role as much as any adrenaline rush he'd chased in combat. Beneath the tough guy exterior, Lee Marvin struggled with chronic pain from old war injuries and a deep sadness that no Oscar or paycheck could alleviate. Late-night binges on bourbon eased the ache for a while, but only until morning. Friends recall him staring out at the Pacific from his Malibu beach house, jaw clenched, as if wrestling an invisible adversary. "There's a storm inside him," a co-star once said. "You can see it in his eyes when he thinks no one's watching." Those storms would ultimately become the haunting undercurrent of many of his greatest performances. Despite personal turmoil, Marvin's career soared in the 1960s. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1966, Cat Ballou, playing both a drunken gunslinger and his straight-laced twin. Audiences laughed and cried in equal measure, discovering that the man who scared them most on screen could also melt their hearts. Yet Marvin himself remained reluctant to bask in the glory. The day of his Oscar win, he thanked his fellow nominees, his Marine buddies, and his publicist, skipping the family mention entirely. It was a telling omission, a reminder that his private battles often overpowered his public victories. As the 1970s dawned, Marvin gravitated toward television, starring in the short-lived series M Squad, and making guest appearances in gritty detective dramas. He embraced the small screen's intimacy, finding in it a platform more forgiving of his vulnerabilities. But even here, the grit of his past demanded authenticity. He coached fellow actors on how to lace boots, cock pistols, and carry a blade as if their lives depended on it. Colleagues joked that Marvin taught them more about manhood than any director ever could. Behind the scenes, Lee Marvin championed causes close to his heart. He volunteered at VA hospitals, visiting wounded veterans who reminded him of the boy he had been. He donated generously to Marine Corps charities, insisting that every struggle required support. Yet his humility kept these acts out of the headlines. He never sought praise for giving back. In his mind, paying it forward was simply the right thing to do, an echo of the discipline and camaraderie he learned under fire. In the twilight of his life, Marvin retreated from Hollywood's glare, settling in Idaho's rugged mountains, a world away from studio backlots. He raised horses, taught survival skills to local scouts, and awakened each day to a simpler rhythm. But he never fully escaped the past. Bluesy tunes on his phonograph reminded him of damp foxholes, and the wind whispering through pine needles stirred memories of helicopter blades overhead. When illness finally claimed him in 1987, it was the hidden wounds, respiratory issues, and complications from old shrapnel that rendered the toughest man he knew mortal. Lee Marvin's story is more than a collection of movie clips and box office receipts. It's the narrative of a boy abandoned and a soldier forged in pain, the chronicle of an actor who refused to hide behind cliches and demanded the raw edges of truth. In every squint, in every wince, in every gunshot heard on screen, there lies the echo of a life lived on both sides of the lens. This untold truth reminds us that even the hardest icons carry fragile hearts within, heartbeats that stutter, falter, and ultimately define the legends we can't forget. In the years following his Oscar triumph, Lee Marvin's career evolved into an eclectic tapestry of roles that revealed fresh facets of the actor beyond his trademark toughness. The late 1960s and early 70s saw him tackling complex characters in films like Valley of the Dolls, where he portrayed a silver-tongued manager whose charm masked a ruthless streak. Critics were divided. Some applauded his willingness to subvert his hard-edged persona, while others dismissed the film as glossy melodrama. Yet Marvin embraced the controversy, arguing that human beings contained contradictions and that truly honest performances required risk. He once remarked in an interview, "If you're not making someone uncomfortable, you're not digging deep enough." Behind the camera, conflict simmered. Directors accustomed to conventional leading men bristled at Marvin's blunt feedback. He insisted on realism, demanding that background actors in war scenes carry authentic packs, that stunt coordinators replicate true martial technique, and that scriptwriters honor the moral complexity of warfare rather than glamorize it. His exacting standards sometimes cost him roles. Studios balked at budget overruns or scheduling delays, yet those very stipulations cemented his status as an actor who refused to pander. Co-stars like Peter Fonda and Warren Beatty later credited Marvin for raising their own performance bar, calling him a brutal mirror in rehearsals. On the home front, Marvin's personal life mirrored his on-screen turbulence. His second marriage, to actress Pamela Feely, produced 2 children but ended in acrimonious divorce amid allegations of infidelity, and his increasing reliance on alcohol to numb chronic pain. Court filings revealed that Marvin's tetchy moods became more pronounced when he battled flare-ups from shrapnel injuries that never fully healed. Doctors prescribed painkillers that only dulled the edge without addressing deeper wounds, and late-night phone calls to friends often ended in slurred vows that their love could overcome any obstacle. The reality, however, was that addiction silently eroded his relationships even as his star continued to burn bright on screen. Professionally, Marvin responded to these personal storms by leaning into roles that explored the darker shades of masculinity. In Point Blank's 1967, he played a criminal out for revenge who moves through a stylized, color-saturated Los Angeles like an unstoppable force. The film's fractured narrative and pulsing jazz score were experimental at the time, and Marvin's steely detachment elevated the mood piece into an artful meditation on betrayal. Modern critics now hail Point Blank as a noir classic, and Marvin's performance remains its magnetic core, a merciless avenger whose humanity glints only in fleeting moments of vulnerability. Meanwhile, Marvin cultivated a quiet reputation as a mentor. He maintained a modest apartment in Los Angeles where he invited younger actors, Steve McQueen, Clint Eastwood, Robert Duvall, to gather for informal workshops. They dissect scripts, rehearse fight choreography, or simply sit in silence, absorbing Marvin's stoic presence. He believed in learning by doing, often telling protégés that true mastery emerged from struggle rather than comfort. Those sessions, recounted in later biographies, shaped an entire generation of tough guy actors who followed his example of blending sincerity with raw power. By the mid-1970s, Marvin's health concerns began to impinge more visibly on his work. Filming The Dirty Dozen in heat-soaked Mediterranean camps, he developed chronic respiratory issues that required periodic oxygen therapy. On-set medics later admitted they feared for his survival during intense action sequences. Yet Marvin pressed on, arguing that the struggle imbued his performances with authenticity no green screen could replicate. His willingness to endure real hardship for art cemented his reputation but also shortened his fuse for theatrical artifice. He walked off several sets when producers refused to adjust shooting schedules that exacerbated his asthma. As the decade closed, he transitioned to television with the detective series M Squad and guest spots on Canon and Policewoman. Audiences found his grizzled, laconic style refreshing in contrast to more polished TV leads. Ratings were solid, yet Marvin chafed at network restrictions: no profanity, sanitized violence, and storylines resolved neatly. He demanded one episode address PTSD among Vietnam veterans, clashing with executives worried about alienating advertisers. The episode ultimately aired but was heavily edited. Marvin publicly decried the cuts, joking to friends that television's need for tidy endings was incompatible with real medical recovery. Marvin's third marriage, to model Elizabeth Talley, offered a late chapter of domestic stability until his persistent health battles resurfaced. He channeled energy into philanthropy, quietly funding scholarship programs at the University of Southern California's Film School and underwriting a trauma ward at the Los Angeles VA hospital. He never sought credit. Hospital administrators recall receiving anonymous checks marked, "From a grateful vet." Meanwhile, he remained a beloved figure among service members who saw in his advocacy a genuine commitment rooted in shared sacrifice rather than celebrity posturing. In 1982, Marvin returned to the big screen in Emperor of the North, playing a defiant hobo battling corporate greed during the Great Depression. His performance, wise, world-weary, yet fiercely determined, earned acclaim as a late career high point. The film, now regarded as an overlooked gem, showcased Marvin's capability for quiet heroism alongside his signature ferocity. When asked about the role in a trade magazine, he reflected on his own life's paradoxes, saying, "I've been both hunter and hunted." This character understands that sometimes the most dangerous thing is a man who's lost everything and still refuses to bow. But by the mid-1980s, his body began to betray him in ways no script could hide. Old injuries flared and doctors found his lung tissue compromised by infections. He made his final television appearance in 1985's Wild Side, a Western miniseries that allowed him to revisit the frontier mythology he'd embodied so often. Viewers noted a certain poignancy in his voice, the harsh rasp softened by years of wear, each line delivered as though he'd lived every hardship himself. Lee Marvin died in 1987 at age 62, passing quietly in his Idaho ranch home. Medical records cited respiratory failure compounded by complications from shrapnel wounds. News of his death prompted an outpouring of tributes from Hollywood and military circles alike. Fans left fedora hats and dog tags at his gravesite, a testament to the twin legacies of on-screen toughness and real-life valor. Today, retrospectives remind us that Marvin's true brilliance lay not just in his imposing frame or gravelly voice, but in the vulnerability he infused into every role, an actor who found his greatest power in exposing his own hidden scars. Even after cameras stopped rolling, Lee Marvin's influence rippled across both film and personal spheres. Directors like Quentin Tarantino and the Coen brothers have cited Marvin's steely intensity as a guiding example of how to fuse vulnerability with raw power. In interviews, Tarantino dubbed Marvin the ultimate embodiment of the anti-hero, praising his ability to telegraph complex morality in a single glare. Cinematic homages appear frequently from the hardened veteran in The Hateful Eight, whose silhouette echoes Marvin's battle-honed posture, to the grim lawman in No Country for Old Men, who mirrors Marvin's stoic reserve. The screen legend lives on in every calculated pause, every deliberate gesture that blurs the line between living hero and haunted man. Beyond the silver screen, Marvin's children and grandchildren have become custodians of his memory. His daughter, Christina, oversees the Lee Marvin estate, meticulously preserving archives of scripts, letters, and war memorabilia. Each year on Memorial Day, she organizes a private gathering at his final Idaho ranch, inviting family members and former Marine buddies to share stories over campfire coffee and vintage bourbon. It's a testament to a man who believed that camaraderie outlasts conflict. Those who knew Marvin personally recount his habitual generosity. He once donated his entire advance from a major studio film to rebuild a veterans hall in his hometown. Such anecdotes, passed down like secret recipes, reveal a generosity as remarkable as his screen presence. Modern retrospectives often probe the duality that defined his life, the actor who channeled his own wartime scars into roles that exposed both savagery and compassion. Film scholars point to a trademark Marvin technique, what they call the shudder, a barely perceptible wince that hints at buried trauma. It appears in A Hatful of Rain, when his tears catch the light, and in The Killers, when a bullet slams him into a grimy alley. These moments are fleeting, yet they anchor his characters in a deep well of authenticity. Academy panels and film festivals continue to celebrate Marvin's work. The annual Lee Marvin Film Symposium held in Santa Barbara attracts historians, actors, and medical experts alike, drawing connections between his on-screen injuries and research into post-traumatic stress. Scholars present papers on the narrative power of imperfection, arguing that Marvin's performances reshaped how masculinity is portrayed in post-war cinema, no longer as invincible bulwarks, but as men haunted by memories they cannot escape. In many ways, Marvin pioneered an approach that now characterizes the modern blockbuster antihero: grizzled, morally ambivalent, yet undeniably human. The Lee Marvin estate has also entered the digital age. Online platforms host interactive timelines plotting his life from Marine recruit to Hollywood maverick. Students can scroll through annotated scripts, listen to archival audio interviews, and even view high-definition scans of his war medals. Each digital exhibit reinforces a central theme: authenticity matters. Marvin insisted that no matter how grand the action sequence or epic the backdrop, grounding a performance in real emotion creates an indelible bond with audiences. Even his choice of clothing on screen has inspired trends. The weathered leather jackets and simple fatigues worn in novel to film adaptations like The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank set a template for cinematic utilitarianism. Costume designers say that the moment an actor dons a garment reminiscent of Marvin's gear, the audience instantly senses a rugged credibility. That effect might seem superficial, yet it underscores his deeper legacy. Lee Marvin taught actors to inhabit every stitch as an extension of their character's history. The personal letters that survive provide glimpses into a reflective mind grappling with the price of fame. In one letter to a friend, Marvin wrote, "I scare easy now. Guns don't terrify me, but silence does." It's a confession that speaks volumes about a man who had faced real bullets yet trembled at the vacuum of quiet. Another letter to his wife Elizabeth Talley, penned during a remote shoot in the Arctic Circle, reveals his longing for simple routines. "I'd trade half my scenes to sit by our hearth and watch you read aloud as the snow falls." These lines humanize an icon, showing that beneath the tough exterior beat a heart longing for ordinary warmth. In Hollywood boardrooms today, Marvin's name still commands respect. Producers seeking to reboot The Dirty Dozen consulted his estate to ensure any recasting honored his original portrayal. Directors approach the Marvin legacy with reverence, believing that authenticity in casting and script demands more than superficial tribute. In a filmed message, Warren Beatty described Marvin as brother in arms whose craft transcended technique to become pure empathy. Such tributes affirm that his peers recognized a rare quality: the actor's capacity to forge a real connection through fiction. Unforgettable legacy. Even beyond the public retrospectives, Lee Marvin carried private chapters few ever glimpsed. In personal diaries never published but glimpsed by close friends, he scribbled raw reflections on childhood displacement, survival guilt from combat, and the moral complexities of his toughest roles. In one fragment, he confessed, "I wander through memory like a ghost, haunted yet compelled to return." Such entries reveal a man who carried more than physical scars. He bore existential questions no script could answer. Under dim lights in his Malibu bungalow, he poured whiskey over clinking ice and stared at the Pacific horizon, weighing the price of fame against the comfort of anonymity. He guarded these pages as fiercely as any role, wary that exposing vulnerability might diminish his aura of unbreakable resolve. Away from cameras and critics, Marvin found a different kind of salvation on his Idaho ranch. He rose before dawn to saddle Old Red, a wary chestnut gelding, and rode through fields still glazed in frost. Ranch hands remember him observing every detail: shifting weather patterns, the way elk footprints etched the meadow, or how mule deer browsed sagebrush at daybreak. In those early hours, his mind quieted, freed from Hollywood's glare. He repaired fences with calloused hands, tended a modest garden, and sat around campfires with neighbors who knew him simply as Lee, the quiet man who offered hearty stew and gentle counsel. The ranch was not a retreat but a living sanctuary, an arena where vulnerability was measured in wind and water rather than box office tallies. Marvin's loyalty to comrades extended through decades. He penned letters to former Marines recalling training ground jokes or the suffocating heat of Pacific Islands. When longtime friend and director Robert Aldrich fell ill, Marvin quietly organized a student-led documentary on Aldrich's most daring films, rallying young cinematographers to honor the director's legacy. He never sought credit. His satisfaction lay in the light in Aldrich's eyes when the first reel premiered in a hospital room. He also hosted annual reunions at the ranch, inviting platoon survivors to share meals under starlit skies. In those gatherings, he wasn't an icon, he was a brother, in arms trading war stories and toasting absent friends whose names hovered in the smoke of open fires. Less known is Marvin's work behind the microphone. In the late 1970s, he recorded several war memoir collections for audio release, his gravelly voice transforming dusty pages into visceral soundscapes. Military historians recalled tears rolling down their cheeks as he described amphibious landings and the metallic bite of ration chocolate in the South Pacific. Later, he lent his rasp to History Channel documentaries on World War II tactics, though few viewers connected that narration to the man who faced on-screen bullets with equal conviction. He also co-wrote an unproduced screenplay about a platoon stranded behind enemy lines, a passion project driven by first-hand experience. Though financing never materialized, Marvin guarded the script as a testament to his creative ambitions beyond acting. Family life became a compass in his final years. Grandchildren arrived each summer to a world of horseback rides, knot tying lessons, and impromptu storytelling around hearthside. He taught them to read weather signs in cottonwood leaves and how to break a colt's spirit with patience, not force. Cousins recall a September harvest feast where Marvin carved pheasant he'd hunted himself, filling plates as if he were back on a movie set, delivering lines with comedic timing. Only this time the audience was unforgivingly honest children whose laughter was the truest applause. Even as illness tightened around him, he directed these family gatherings with the same pride he once reserved for high-stakes film shoots, ensuring each moment brimmed with lessons in resilience and gratitude. In the years before his passing, Marvin embraced discreet philanthropy. He founded the Lee Marvin Legacy Foundation, using film royalties to fund scholarships for veterans studying at his alma mater's film program. Local VA hospitals received anonymous winter fuel grants, ensuring that aging Marines could heat their homes in freezing months. Administrators remember envelopes marked only with his initials, backed by a note reading, "From a grateful comrade." In a rare 1986 interview, his last, Marvin reflected, "I fought real wars so I could act fake ones, and every performance is an extension of who you are. I hope mine left more light than darkness." It was both confession and benediction, spoken without hint of vanity. When Lee Marvin died in 1987 at age 62, industry obituaries celebrated his roles but struggled to capture his layered legacy. Today, those untold truths emerge in whispered anecdotes at film festivals, in pages of hidden diaries safeguarded by his estate, and in the laughter of grandchildren who carry his stories forward. He remains a study in contrasts, a man who wielded toughness as armor yet craved the simple grace of shared morning rides and unguarded family meals. His life reminds us that icons conceal personal odysseys as dramatic as any screenplay, and that behind the steel glare and gravelly drawl stood a man committed to bearing witness, making amends, and finding peace amid the relentless drama of existence. In the decade since his passing, Lee Marvin's legend has expanded far beyond his iconic roles to become a symbol of authenticity and unvarnished humanity in cinema. Film retrospectives and academic conferences often dedicate entire panels to dissecting what critics now call the Marvin method. That uncanny ability to convey both steely resolve and buried vulnerability with a single glance. Modern actors cite his performances as blueprints for crafting layered anti-heroes who can terrify, inspire pity, or even crack a smile under the weight of the world. Each screening of The Dirty Dozen or Point Blank feels less like nostalgia and more like a masterclass in how raw emotion can elevate genre filmmaking into something timeless. Streaming platforms have fueled a resurgence of interest in Marvin's work. Curated collections on major services group his war dramas next to psychological thrillers, highlighting the breadth of his range. Audiences binge through his catalog and discover patterns they might have missed, the persistent tremor in his voice after physical confrontation scenes, the way his eyes narrow into near-closed slits when a character confronts betrayal. Social media chatter tags him as the original cinematic antihero, sparking hashtags like Pop Marvin moments and Squint stories that celebrate his legendary squint and signature growl. Even long after the final credits have rolled, fans dissect his subtleties, sharing GIFs of his most electrifying reactions and dissecting what lies behind each wince. Beyond the screen, Marvin's influence permeates acting curricula. Film schools regularly assign students to reenact scenes from Cat Ballou or Emperor of the North, challenging them to translate his textured rituals. A slow hand adjustment of a jacket cuff, a casual toss of a cigarette butt, into fully realized character beats. Professors praise his refusal to rely on melodrama or conventional charm, insisting that true power emerges from grounded, often uncomfortable truth. Workshops encourage young performers to study his archived rehearsal footage, where Marvin's off-camera commentary offers insights into his meticulous process, demanding realistic weapon handling, authentic period costuming, and a psychological depth that invited collaborators to match his intensity. Marvin's personal archives, letters, diaries, and unpublished scripts, are now preserved in a dedicated wing of a Southern California museum. Visitors can leaf through weathered correspondence to his second wife, where frank passages reveal the cost of fame on his health and relationships. One poignant entry reads, "I wake each day feeling haunted by laughter, wondering if the world ever hears the silence beneath it." Another outlines an unproduced screenplay about a soldier's post-war descent, illustrating how he sought to fuse his own wartime memories with imaginative storytelling. These fragile papers, displayed under gentle light, remind scholars that the man beneath the legend wrestled constantly with the question of how to honor lived experience without being consumed by it. In the realm of popular culture, Marvin's tough but tender persona has inspired homages across mediums. Comic book artists portray vigilante characters in crisp trench coats, grizzled features echoing Marvin's scarred visage. Video game developers model rugged protagonists after his silhouette, complete with a half-shadowed face and deliberate, measured movements. Music videos occasionally weave in stylized nods, a slow motion walk away from an explosion, a lingering camera hold on a chained gate. All unmistakable echoes of Marvin's gravitas. These creative echoes aren't mere pastiche, they signal an enduring appetite for heroes who feel lived in, flawed, and relentlessly driven. On the small screen, series like True Detective and Justified bear the imprint of Marvin's approach to complexity. Showrunners label their leads Marvinesque when they layer stoic exteriors over inner turmoil, and critics laud episodes that capture fleeting, Marvin moments. Instances when a hardened face betrays a flicker of doubt or empathy. Even reality TV producers borrow from his style, framing confessional interviews to mimic his direct, unsparing stares into the lens, as though the camera itself demands both confession and confrontation. The subtle art of letting silence speak volumes, so masterfully wielded by Marvin, has seeped into countless storytelling forms. Marvin's estate continues to champion his memory through scholarship and mentorship. The Lee Marvin Legacy Foundation offers annual grants to veterans pursuing film careers, helping fund tuition and equipment for those determined to tell stories shaped by service. Workshops in Los Angeles pair retired Marines with young filmmakers, creating spaces where real battlefield experience informs cinematic representation. Participants often cite Marvin's own journey, from reluctant recruit to celebrated actor, as both inspiration and proof that reinvention remains possible, even amid trauma. Literary biographies released in recent years delve deeper into his formative years, drawing on interviews with foster, sibling descendants in Florida and childhood friends in New York. These accounts paint a fuller portrait, a boy who found refuge in library basements, devouring dime store westerns and dreaming of worlds beyond his tumultuous upbringing. Such insights reinforce a core truth. Marvin's drive for authenticity originated long before Hollywood cameras ever rolled. His performances, at their best, embodied a lifelong quest to turn personal history into shared catharsis. Today, as cinephiles queue for special editions of Lee Marvin classics on 4K Ultra HD and rotating cinema programs screen restored prints to packed houses, the legacy feels undeniably alive. Each audience that sits hush under a marquee light absorbs the echo of a man who risked everything. Sobriety, relationships, even his own well-being, to bring characters to life with uncompromising honesty. In a world where blockbuster spectacle often overshadows nuanced storytelling, the untold truth of Lee Marvin remains a clarion call. Greatness lies not in perfection, but in the courage to show every scar. Even now, Lee Marvin's story refuses to end with his final curtain. Across decades, emerging filmmakers return to his work as though consulting a masterclass carved in celluloid. When a director stages an ambush sequence, They recall the tension Marvin generated in The Dirty Dozen without a single cut. When an actor confronts betrayal, they study the flicker of pain in his eyes in Point Blank. From camera tests to rap party anecdotes, Marvin's presence remains a benchmark for authenticity. Film preservation societies worldwide honor his legacy by restoring every reel that bears his visage. Archivists reference scratch marks on original negatives, battle scars as literal as those he endured in wartime. At the American Film Institute, censors and conservationists collaborate to repair damaged frames of dozens of his war epics, ensuring that his controlled ferocity and fleeting tenderness survive into 4K restorations. Each frame recovered becomes a fragment of cultural memory, a promise that no hero's complexity will be lost to age or neglect. Marvin's ethos informs modern production culture as well. On major studio lots, stunt coordinators benchmark safety protocols against his insistence on realism, historically accurate weapons, rigorous training, and authentic costume design. In practical terms, Marvin's influence birthed on-set guidelines that prioritize actor preparation, ensuring performers understand every physical nuance of their roles. These measures, once dismissed as excessive, now underpin entire departments dedicated to crafting immersive, truthful portrayals. By demanding that no detail be overlooked, Marvin redefined the language of cinematic verisimilitude. In acting schools, Marvin's performances remain required viewing. Universities assign students to deliver monologues in his style, each syllable deliberate, each pause pregnant with internal conflict. Workshops invite alumni to dissect his nuanced use of silence, the way he allows the room to breathe around him. These exercises teach that mastery does not come from volume or swagger, but from the courage to reveal vulnerability within apparent toughness. Through this tutelage, new generations learn that lasting power in performance comes not from spectacle alone, but from exposing the human heart's fragile corners. Marvin's military service and subsequent advocacy continue to resonate among veterans turned artists. The Lee Marvin Legacy Foundation's grants have enabled dozens of former service members to attend film schools, produce documentaries, and direct narratives rooted in real battlefield experience. Those who receive support often describe encountering Marvin's voice as a guiding spirit. His example frees them to mine their own painful memories for creative truth. In that way, his life becomes a living workshop where courage in combat translates to integrity behind the camera. Cultural festivals held in New York, Los Angeles, and London curate entire retrospectives around his anniversaries. Panels featuring cinematographers, sound designers, and costumers explore how Marvin's collaborative approach shaped every department's commitment to authenticity. Q&A sessions with longtime collaborators reveal behind-the-scenes tales of on-set camaraderie, late-night script rewrites, and spontaneous rehearsals carried out in makeup trailers. Audiences leave these events chattering about the alchemy that occurs when every creative element bows to the actor's uncompromising standard. In the digital sphere, podcasts dedicated to performance craft dissect his most memorable scenes line by line. Sound engineers remix his signature growl alongside ambient battlefield audio, creating immersive auditory experiences that bring home the thrum of artillery and the tension of guerrilla ambushes. Editors compile commentary tracks where directors recount specific camera angles chosen to capture the quiver of his lip or the rigid set of his shoulders. This secondary content sustains Marvin's legacy beyond the primary texts of his films, weaving his influence into the dialogue of film theory and history podcasts worldwide. Streaming algorithms now recommend Marvin's films to fans of modern anti-heroes. Viewers who fell in love with characters like Walter White or Inspector Morse discover a lineage that traces back to Marvin's textured performances. Each recommendation blends his war dramas with contemporary thrillers, illuminating thematic continuities: men at war, men at odds with society, men grappling with inner demons. Algorithms may be synthetic, but their suggestions reveal an enduring human appetite for nuanced protagonists, characters who, like Marvin himself, invite empathy even as they exude danger. Online memorial pages keep his memory alive through fan-generated content, illustrative mashups pairing his best lines with animated sequences, speculative scripts that insert Marvin into contemporary narratives, and virtual reality experiences where audiences assume the vantage point of his characters. These unofficial tributes reflect both the depth of collective admiration and the malleability of his mythos. Marvin becomes more than a man; he evolves into an archetype of resilience, layered complexity, and moral grit. In classrooms and living rooms, viewers continue to debate his finest moment. Is it the chilling menace he projects in Point Blank, the wry humor and pathos of Cat Ballou, or the steely compassion that emerges when his character consoles a comrade? no consensus emerges, and that may be the greatest testament to his versatility. His performances invite multiple interpretations, each revealing different facets of his humanity. That multiplicity ensures that Marvin's legacy remains a living discourse rather than a closed chapter. As fresh generations discover his films, film historians update canonical lists to include Marvin alongside Brando, Eastwood, and Peck. Documentaries chronicle his life, drawing parallels between his wartime experiences and the moral ambiguities he portrayed on screen. Biographers unearth new letters, diaries, and photographs, always seeking untold moments, evidence that the man who played so many hardened figures was himself a seeker of truth. In the final analysis, Lee Marvin's untold legacy is less about individual accolades and more about the standards he set, the courage to unveil every scar, the willingness to challenge artifice, and the humility to serve others beyond the silver screen. His life reminds us that true greatness resides in imperfection and that the deepest connections form when storytellers risk revealing their demons.